Hello, this is Muddles, and I'm here with our very first baking video here on the channel. So I'm making a lemon flan baked custard thing. Don't really know what to call it. This is not a recipe, so I have no quantities for you at all. But it's normally fairly easy to work out how much by looking. So what I'm starting with at the moment is the biscuit base. So I'm doing a kind of digestive-like biscuit base. So I've got some plain wholemeal flour. And then I am going to blend up some oats. Yeah, sorry, I forgot. This bit didn't record very well because my fridge broke. Anyway, so what happened is that I blended up some oats into kind of an oat flour. Then I added some soya margarine and some vegetable fat and a few tablespoons of sugar. And then I used the back of a spoon to smoosh everything together until it resembled sort of breadcrumish texture, which is what I'm doing now. Sorry about that cut earlier. It's unfortunate if you don't record something at the time. There's nothing you can do about it, but there you go. So yeah, the reason that I choose these fats is because they're very soft and very easy to mix in. And also this tart is dairy-free completely. Although you don't have to make it dairy-free if you don't want to, but I made it dairy-free. Right, so finally I'm adding a bit of my third fat, which is sunflower oil, which I didn't quite manage to hold in front of the camera properly. So I'm just going to add enough of that to essentially make it easier to stir everything in. And to get it to all come together. I quite often use a bit of liquid oil as part of my fat rather than adding water to bring everything together. I think it makes for a better biscuit at the end. And you can see that it does start to come together very nicely with that. I should probably talk through a bit what you missed when I didn't manage to record properly. So I used a smoothie maker and I kind of 2/3 filled the jug of that smoothie maker with oats, and I basically pulsed it until I had a fine powder, and then I added that. And then I added probably about 50 grams of vegetable fat and probably maybe 100 grams of margarine. And that's what you missed. And a few tablespoons of sugar. So this is a really, really simple biscuit. It's really quick and easy to make. And I think it makes a better base than crushing up pre-made biscuits because you get a full, it slices better. So now I've just pressed it into a baking tray, into as flat a layer as I could. It doesn't need to be completely flat, it's fine. So now I'm going to move on to the topping. So this is a lemon baked custard dessert. So I've got my 2 lemons and I'm going to grate all of the zest off them. The zest is like, it's the best part of the lemon in my opinion. It carries so much flavour and you really don't want to lose any of it if you can afford to. If you can save it, save it. There we go. So that's the complete zest of 2 lemons. Probably, yeah. I think I decided not to film the entire thing because it's basically just me grating 2 lemons. It's a bit time consuming as well, so now I just kind of get all of the zest that I can off the grater, and there we go. So the next step is to get the juice out of my 2 lemons. Which I'm using I'm just using a hand juicer. Before I cut the lemons, I roll them a little bit with the palm of my under the palm of my hand. I don't actually know if this works, but it's meant to make it easier to get the juice to release from the lemon. And it sort of makes sense if you think about it, because what you're probably doing is breaking down some of the cells inside the lemon. So maybe the juice would be easier to get to. I don't know. That's the idea anyway. Can't do any harm, so. There we go. Just cut the lemons in half and then juice them. So although the juice that I use does have like this little, a few spikes to stop pips from going down into the, when you're pouring the juice out of the juicer, I don't actually use it in practice because I think you still get lots of bits going through and you just spend a very, very long time trying to very slowly and carefully pour your lemon juice out of out through these little pegs. So I actually just use a sieve now. I just juice my lemons and then pour it through a sieve to get rid of the pips and the pulp. Because when you're using that strainer that's built in, the pulp of the lemon will actually block up the ways out, and then it will start going around the side anyway, so you'll end up with pips in your juice. So it's just easier. So when you're juicing a lemon, make sure that you move your hands around so you're pressing from all sides. That you press down on every bit of the lemon at some point, because you get kind of you can feel when the lemon is all juiced, if that makes sense. You start being able to feel the juicer as you twist it. Right, so now I've got the juice of those 2 lemons, all of the zest, and I'm putting it into my bowl. This is the same bowl I used earlier, incidentally, because I like to save on washing up. So I have my juice and my zest. And to this, I'm going to add a little bit of oil, which I know it looks really weird, and all the way through you might see a bit of it on the surface, but I promise when you bake it, it does, it all mixes together, it emulsifies, it's fine. So the other thing that I'm using, this was a bit of an experiment for me, was making my own oat milk. So again, I've got the oats, I've got my smoothie maker, blender, bullet mixer, whatever it's called, and then I just top that up with water, and you can already see that it's starting to foam. This is really fun, actually. I really like the way that this works because the oats kind of act as a thickener in themselves. They do give a bit of a flavour to the final product, but not really something that's very noticeable. But if you think about it, you can taste a bit of oat in it, but it's not a lot. So yeah, I pulse it for a good few seconds to try and make it as smooth as possible. And then I'm just going to pour that in. I'm actually quite careful with the way I pour it in. I'm actually going to pour about 2/3 of it in, and then refill it with water and then blend it again. And the reason I do that is that there's always a bit of sediment at the bottom of the you can see always a bit of sediment at the bottom of the jug, and it's best not to put that in as it is. I think it gets a smoother result if you refill it with water and then blend it again, or half fill it. I think I did this time, just to get rid of some of those bigger oaty bits. There we go. I think there we go. The rest of the oat milk. Yeah, there's a few little bits at the bottom there, but honestly, you don't notice them in the final product. One of the reasons that I'm doing this is because a lot of really nice custard tarts and things, there's really, there's ways to make them that are very complicated and require a lot of steps. Whereas this is it's kind of, this is the first time I did this. I didn't use a recipe. I kind of just made off of the top of my head and it worked. And the reason that it worked is because I put in enough setting ingredients. I put in a lot of high fat ingredients to make it nice and smooth and silky. And I put in lots of lemon to flavour it. And so you end up with something nice and smooth. So here I'm adding my eggs. I added 3 at this point. I do actually add another one later. So the eggs provide the setting, and they also add a nice, eggy richness to it. So the things which are going to help this to set are my eggs and my oat, and the proteins in the oat. It's kind of weird when you think about it, because essentially it's the way that oats work. It's the same as making porridge. You when you cook oats or rehydrate oats, and leave it to soak, then it does set a bit, and so I'm taking advantage of that to go for a kind of to create a kind of gentleish set. So now I'm just using a spatula to try and break up my eggs. I think in a minute I realised that it's just easier to use a stick blender, and I just use a stick blender. But at this point I was still kind of going for the spatula, trying to find all the egg yolks, break them all up. If I'd used a jug or something, it would have been easier to do this with a spatula. But in a bowl, it's very hard because it will splash if you stir it too vigorously. Oh, anyway, I think at this point I realised I should probably add some sugar to this dessert of mine. So I added, I don't know, probably 75 to 100 grams of sugar, and it just dissolved straight away, which is perfect. I like my lemon desserts quite tart and quite zesty, so I didn't really want to add too much sugar. There we go, everything's coming to you can still see that sunflower oil that I put in 20 to 25 minutes. It doesn't need to be fully cooked at that point because it's going to be baked again. So it needs to be set enough that the custard doesn't soak into it, but not so much that it's completely rigid. So there we go. There's my last egg going in, just because, you know. And there we go. I'll just blend it up again, and then it will be ready to go into the tin. It's very exciting. It's always a good moment when you can just tip your entire thing into the oven and then leave it and forget about it. It's always good. And when I say forget about it, don't actually forget about it, but with these custards you have to bake them at a very low temperature. So I baked this at about 140 degrees in my fan oven, so about 160 in a conventional oven probably. And I think I just left it for about 45 minutes before I even checked it. Yeah, so here's my base after it's been baked. You can see it's taken on a bit of colour, but not too much. And literally just pouring the custard on. And hoping that it's not going to overflow the tin. The worst bit, of course, is that you then have to put this into the oven without spilling it, which was fun. So, yeah, but I think I did manage it, actually. There were no spillages involved in this bake. And this final bit is when it came out of the oven about an hour later. And you can see it's set, but there's a tiny bit of jiggliness in the middle. And that was absolutely perfect. So I will stick a picture of the end product here. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Kind of separating out a little bit, but now it's got more, now it's got the eggs and the sugar in there, it is starting to incorporate a little bit more. And it is, you know, normally it's bad if you have fatty and water-based things in the same mix, but in baking you use a lot of things that can act as emulsifiers, like eggs. Just can bring everything together. I'm adding some lemon curd. Lemon curd is just a fantastic baking ingredient. I don't think it's used enough in baking. It's often used to kind of top things, but actually just adding some lemon curd to something, it's already got that lovely zesty flavour. It's already got a good texture. It's already got some egg in it. You know, it's just a fantastic baking ingredient, and it's really good for things like this where you just want to add that little bit of extra lemon flavouring. And I think it's a better way of doing it than reaching for the lemon oil or lemon extract. And also it adds a bit of colour. The other thing about using oats is that they kind of have a sort of, I don't want to say greyish colour, but they're kind of a murky white. You know what I mean, like slightly porridgey colour. Right, so now I'm going to use some soy milk. This is my second dairy-free milk that I'm using. And I'm probably only putting in like 300 or 400 mils or so of it. And that's just because I needed more fluid in there. And I'm finally adding the last bit of sugar, so probably another 75 grams or so. Yeah, just it's good to have some actual purchased milk in there because it just I find it stabilizes things a bit more, and just helps to bring everything together. I don't really like to use too much oat milk when I'm doing this sort of thing because it's a bit, this is only like the second time I've used it, it's a bit unpredictable, and I wanted to put something in that would make sure that it did work even if the oat milk did act in a strange way, if that makes sense. And as I'm mixing everything together, you can now see that the oil on top is almost completely gone, which is really good. But I don't know if you can see, actually. I can see it because I'm looking for it. You can still see traces of unmixed in egg in there. Oh, it's really obvious right now. So you can see those kind of darker bits are bits of egg white which just haven't incorporated properly. So I go for the stick blender. There we go. I was hoping I would at some point. So stick blends are just fantastic when you're trying to make a smooth custard. Whether you're doing it kind of on the stovetop or whether you're getting something ready to bake. So in this case, it's got, it's got egg in it, which hasn't been fully incorporated at this point. It has, a few bits of oat floating around in there, and it also has the zest of the lemon, which you could, it's fine if it is left whole, but actually, blending it, I think, made the end product really, really smooth and silky. So, was definitely worth it for me. And I'm adding another egg in a second. I think at this point I'm taking the motor off the stick blender so that I can put the other egg in without risking knocking it all over. I should talk about the base at this point because we're nearly at the point where we'll need it. So I put it in the oven at about 180 degrees in my fan oven, so about 200 degrees in a non-fan oven. And I think I left it in for about 20 minutes.